Hello and welcome to Healing Tips from the Heart, Intuition with Helpers, Healers, and Guides. I am your host, Dr. Lori Hops, licensed psychologist, writer, and artist. I've explored mind, body, and spirit related to intuition, or your personal guidance system, since early childhood. Meet my guests who have learned from their personal and professional lives to explore vast realms of knowing, synchronicities, and overcoming challenges. Their stories may inspire you with tools to enhance your daily living and relationships. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, I have a very special guest, Sherry O'Brien, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about her before we begin. Sherry O'Brien is a licensed clinical social worker and is an advanced clinical hypnotherapist and psychotherapist and owner of the business Mind, Body, Spirit Inner-grations. She specializes in personal growth and transformation, working with people who have experienced chronic illness, grief and loss, and other emotional disorders. She has taught many workshops and groups and has had a long-standing private practice to help people with change, and has a book called Peaks and Valleys, Integrative Approaches for Recovering from Loss. She also has several meditation audio programs that are also available along with her book. Sherry is trained in a great many modalities for mental health and physical health, spiritual health practices, including comprehensive energy psychology, emotional freedom techniques, advanced clinical hypnotherapy, PSYCH, subtle energy therapy, bereavement counseling, integrative energy therapy, and guided imagery. And she is also a Reiki master and an ordained minister. So welcome, Sherry. It's so good to have you here today.
It's good to be here, Lori.
Is there anything else you'd like to share before we begin?
Well, that was quite an introduction, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
I've been around for a while.
You have been, and you have a curious mind, and you're always looking for things to help people, which is a wonderful thing. It's to their benefit that you do.
Yes.
Yeah. And I just want people to know that I've known you for several years. We've worked together through the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology many years ago. I think we started on the board of directors the same year.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, quite a while ago, and have worked together in different projects and have had the pleasure of meeting in person at conferences and spending time together at a retreat one time that was just great. I remember sitting with you poolside and having some lovely conversation.
A nice meeting.
Yeah, that was great. So what can you share with us today about healing tips from the heart or other things that are on your mind about intuition or helpers?
I guess when I first spoke to you about doing this, I was kind of searching my mind thinking, okay, how have I used my intuition? Because it has, I guess what I want to say, it's been so natural for me. I didn't think about using it, it just happened. And one of the things that I know as far as the intuition goes is going back to my book, some lady that I spoke to said, you're going to write a book. And I looked at her, I was working 3 jobs, and I'm thinking, I don't even know where to start with that. I don't know how to do that. And she said, no, you're going to write a book. And I just listened. I didn't think, no, I can't do that. And all of a sudden it triggered something within me. Well, maybe I could put my notes together from workshops and stuff like that. And I just listened to that intuition. When it comes to the book, when it came to the meditations, one of the meditations, the release and transform burden meditation, I was very angry at God, the divine, whatever name you go by. And my nephew was dying of cancer, and I felt like I couldn't do anything to help him.
Mm.
And I was in meditation, and I was in that space of being very angry and saying, what good is it for me to have all these tools if I can't help my own loved ones? And that, I am going to say, was literally channeled through me. So I experienced the meditation. And that was probably one of the biggest intuitive things that I've experienced, because I can't say anything other than it was channeled through me. And I was taken in a vortex of energy to release the burden that I was feeling, and the frustration and the anger and all those emotions. And then basically guided to bring back in the light after releasing the darkness, the shadow, that feeling of heaviness. That was probably one of the biggest intuitive hits I've had. And it's just been one of those things where I've learned to listen, albeit there are times when, which I think we all do, we're a little resistant because it feels, I don't know, like it's going to interfere with our lives, something like that.
Yeah, wow, what an incredible story you're sharing. Thank you so much for sharing such a deep and personal story.
You're
It's
welcome.
just, yeah, and that you were able to learn so much from it and take it forward. I completely relate to what you're saying about being resistant,
Yes.
and also not recognizing sometimes, like you've shared so
Yes.
many things that we can kind of pull apart here. I mean, on the one hand, you said you didn't really recognize it, and someone had to kind of tell you you're going to write a book, and you're like, what are you talking about? You must have me confused with someone else. But then it comes to be. But then in this dark night of the soul, this incredible moment of anguish where your loved one, you can't help. And maybe you turn to something for answers, or maybe you were completely
Yes.
cut off, but somehow this channeling came through you. So, I mean, that, and then to have it be so compelling, and that you share it then with others, not just the story, but the fruits of that meditation. I'm sure you found that it's been healing for other people as well.
Well, that was the guidance that I got, was, it was kind of a flippant, you're not the only one that's dealing with this, share this with others.
Wow.
And again, that was the first time I was thinking, I don't know how to do this. I don't know where to start.
Mm.
And when you ask the how and the why, and all of this comes, I mean, at least in my situation, I I immediately found somebody in right next to my neighborhood, a young man that was learning how to do recordings, and he did the recording for me of the meditation. And then I found a woman who um, did the artwork for me, and one thing fell into place after another. And I found that with my book, frankly, I had no idea how to do it. And I did take a course with well, to figure out how to put all the pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
After I decided to do it, things again started falling into place. Everything from the publisher to the artwork to people doing testimonies and so forth. It was one of those things. Okay, I'm going to do this, and then boom, boom, boom. It's like the divine, the intuition interacting together.
Yep. Yep. It's like a perfect marriage,
Yes.
which we often don't get in real life.
Well, when we cooperate and we communicate effectively, and
But
that
yeah,
goes with intuition.
well, but there, I love the fact that you were like, I don't know what I'm doing, so help me. So that
Yes.
openness, and then things are able to fall into place, and the right
Yes.
people, the right timing. I've had those things happen to me throughout my life too, not always, but
Absolutely.
especially when there's a dire need. it seems that it can kind of go both ways. You can either shut down and be completely cut off and kind of
Yes.
sink into the hole, or if you start to reach out, you get a momentum, and then it's like you're pushed from behind
Yes.
almost.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know I was when I was directed, and I do mean directed, to go back to go to grad school to get my graduate degree. I know that um, once I came into alignment with knowing that in order to help others, that this was something that I was going to have to do. That all, I'd love to say it all fell into place, but not without doing a great deal of work and so forth. But again, I was guided in a way that helped me get through. I still don't know how I got through grad school and worked and did all the things, because I was, going through this. I had my son to raise. I was going through lots of different things at the time.
Mhm.
Um, I think back at it, and I'm sure a lot of people do wonder how the heck they got through something like that. But I came across it, and I'm not going to say this verbatim, but I remember coming across a statement to the extent of not allowing your past to define you, but to
Mhm.
grow from it,
Mhm.
and helping others through it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that helped me get through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes we probably go to bed at night and wonder how in the world are you gonna even make it through the night, let alone get up in the morning
Yes.
and make
Yeah.
it through the day, especially when you have people who are relying on you. It can feel very beyond daunting. It can feel completely
Yes.
overwhelming. So when you had this amazing experience with the channeling of the meditation that came through, did it have immediate, you said that you felt something right away. Did it have an impact for you?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the experience that I was going through, again, trying to help my nephew, and feeling really helpless and so forth, and feeling the burden of um and what I mean by burden is that heaviness of grief,
Mm.
because grief is a very low frequency, heavy experience of energy. And so when I went through the meditation, I could tell a difference, well, for me immediately, because one, there was this inner knowing that the divine was there to help. And two, I could get mad at God, the divine, whatever name you go by, without being punished.
Okay,
and
that's important.
and sharing what I need and being guided to that. And so the meditation, after I finished, again, what I'm going to call channeling it, it helped lift that heaviness that was there,
Wow.
and that sense of a burden, because I did feel like I needed to. And I know I did help my nephew and my sister in a variety of ways, but of course, I couldn't eradicate the cancer.
You were talking about your anger, and
Yes,
knowing, I mean, there's so much here because a lot of times people are angry at God or the divine or circumstances,
yes,
and there is sometimes a fear of retribution or guilt that they shouldn't be angry or that they'll be disowned, or something bad will happen if they express their
yes,
feelings of anger. But for you, you were able to have a safety around that, get it out, and then move through into another experience, which was incredibly nurturing for you and
yes.
brought you closer really to love. If I'm putting words in your mouth, but that's my experience of hearing
No,
what you said.
it's true. And I think when I really go back into the event, um, what I know is, and I know you do as well, if we stuff our emotions, they don't go anywhere.
Well, and this is really what
Yes,
happens with grief. You just kind of get knocked down and you have to pick yourself
yes,
back up again.
yes, yes. And what I know is the frustration that comes with the having to continue when you're not feeling good, when you're feeling sad, when you're feeling angry, all those feelings. There are no right or wrong feelings. Feelings are natural. It's how we react to those feelings.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that in my practice I was taught traditional bereavement counseling, but what I found was that it wasn't really I'm not saying it doesn't help some people, it does, but when people are um, from traumatic grief to the experience of complicated grief, layers of grief, the variety of things, you really have to work with that energy. You can't just keep stuffing. Well, you can, but then it makes everything a little bit more challenging if you do that. And that was one of the intuitive things that led me to write the book, was the people that I was working with, and they would get frustrated basically because they would talk about the stages of grief, and there was an implication that you go through these stages and somehow you're over it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I remember a guy coming in my bereavement group and wanting to know, when am I going to get to acceptance? How long does it take to get there? As if there was a specific time. And, the group was great. And I had already started talking about there's no specific time that people have to be over grief. You don't really get over it. You learn how to live with it.
Yeah.
And that's my goal, was to assist others, and certainly myself and my family. That's what put me on this path, was because when my nephew died and my brother committed suicide, and there wasn't a whole heck of a lot in the traditional sense of bereavement counseling. It didn't address those traumatic experiences. It didn't address how to reprocess the memories, and
Mm-hmm.
it didn't address the releasing the energies so that you could move through it in a way that was healing.
Wow. So you've had more than your share of tragedies.
That is what really took me into doing this work. I
Mm.
really think I kind of have a saying that it's those of us that have gone through hell and navigated our way through it that are best able to help others navigate their way through it too.
Yeah.
And I think that is for me, it was the best option.
Well, and not everyone is afforded the ability to navigate through it so gracefully. I mean, despite the pain and torture and all the things that we go through as humans, but you had a light and an ability to understand and grab onto some of those healing techniques and say the bereavement counseling that you knew at the time wasn't enough.
Yes.
Well, we've had to shift here today several times, but we are troopers, so we're continuing. And what I was saying, Sherry, is that there's been times in my life, my clients' lives, family, friends, that life takes turns that just are beyond harrowing, really.
Yes.
Sometimes things happen that when we're growing up, we're not even aware is possible in being human. And when we reach those moments, they're at the precipice of what's expected and what's known, for
Mhm.
sure with mental health care, at
Yes.
least conventional care. And so sometimes we put pressure on ourselves to know what to do to survive it, to overcome it. And that adds to extra suffering because sometimes there is no getting over it or dealing with it or understanding
No.
it. It's beyond the pale of our comprehension.
Yes. Yeah. And I've had some clients, interestingly enough, what I have found, and it happened to me too, and some of the new age thought, law of attraction in particular. And there's an implication that somehow we've attracted this. And, I remember this one woman that I've worked with, and she came in and she wanted to know, as a child, how she attracted the sexual abuse and how this, we went into a whole lot of things here, but basically the law of attraction, when it's used to condemn a person, is one of those things that there's a lot of grief about it, because when I look at the people that I work with, they believe they've done something wrong that is attracting this, whatever the negative, whatever the burden or the losses or whatever is going on. And a lot of kids will grow up and be told it's their fault, blah, blah, blah. And what I found was working with people, helping them understand that we can have what we refer to as the psychological reversals. We can have this incongruency subconsciously within us that interferes with us being able to change our beliefs that lead to certain behaviors, etc. And that's one of the things that I really was attracted to the energy psychology world about. And I also know that, frankly, when I was doing talk therapy, I was getting frustrated because I didn't have a lot of tools, and there's only so much you can do with, yes, it's important to, talk about what's going on, but there's only so much you can do with that. And being able to look at the beliefs that are interfering with whatever experience that you want it was pretty profound. And I remember going back to intuition, one of the times I was working with a client, I was doing hypnotherapy, and I was trying to do it as I was taught to do it. And they were getting ready to go into an abreaction because of the trauma place they went back to. And I remember trying to do the way that I was trained and so forth. And I remember hearing a pretty loud command, "Get out of the way." Well, that was a little, I'm like, well, okay. And when I did that, when I accepted that, I was led to do some of the tapping, and the person didn't have to go through the trauma. We were able to titrate that down. And that was one of the first aha moments for me is, yes, when we're trained to do certain techniques, the training has to be, in order to train, you have to have specifics that you follow. But what I was given at that time was permission to integrate, because that's really, none of us need talk therapy all the time. None of us need hypnotherapy all the time. None of us need whatever kind of technique we're working on. There are going to be times when we need to be able to integrate other forms. And that kind of goes with your life. There are going to be things that we've worked with and done, and it worked for a while. And then all of a sudden you have to learn something new to integrate or to help you move forward through those emotions that feel that devastating immobility that happens when you're not sure what the next step is.
Yeah, for yourself or the people you're working with.
Yes.
So for
Yeah.
those, thank you for that extended description of what you listen to and what you go through. For those who don't know and aren't as familiar with some of the terms, it may be as simple as saying, if you blame yourself, that's a constraint and it's hard to move forward. But
Yes.
to analyze the thoughts behind that can only get you spinning so far sometimes. But if you
Yeah.
say something like, even though I'm blaming myself, I still accept the situation, or I still love
Yeah.
myself, or I'm still worthy of being alive, that contradiction of, even though this is awful, this is something good, and you hold them together at the same time while activating a body response, not just a
Yes.
mental response, sometimes that unhinges a stuck place. And then you
Yes.
can burst through to something different that maybe hypnosis or cognitive behavioral therapy or something else doesn't offer. And yet, that also, the tapping isn't a panacea either.
No,
Yeah,
it doesn't work for everything and
right.
everybody and all the time. And the integration piece of it, which is really what going back to the book, is why I wrote the book, was because, again, your traditional bereavement support groups and other types of therapies are great, but there are going to be times when you need something different. And that's why I thought it was important to put those integrative skills and techniques in the book so people can utilize. It's more like a workbook. They can utilize it, try it out, see what helps them. Sometimes it might be guided imagery, sometimes it might be some other type of technique. And
Yeah.
that was one of the biggest aha moments I had. Again, it was one of the, between the meditation and the channeling of that guided imagery, that get out of the way and just be open to allowing yourself to trust the intuitive guidance. It was so profound. Get out of the way was kind of a rough way to do it, but basically I was trying to orchestrate everything,
Yeah.
when if I just allowed it to flow, then I knew I could use this, or I could use some other type of technique. And we used a couple different ones there. And I found that to be helpful in my own journey, my own healing journey. I don't think I've ever used anything with anybody that I haven't used myself.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, they say, you can only take someone as far as you yourself have gone. I mean,
Yes.
sometimes we're surprised and we're like, wow, that person's going out there and I don't know, but you at least are holding space for them. And you've maybe been in the situation of not knowing where someone else is, but feeling safe enough to be witness to that. So you may
Yes.
not know exactly.
No.
Yeah, as you were saying, get out of the way. I had a very poignant moment when a very, very dear friend was dying. And I was literally standing at the foot of the bed and I heard uh, move aside. And I thought it meant like the person is moving aside. It was a
Oh,
physical
okay.
command.
Yes.
It was like step aside, moves. I'm like going through the metaphors. And then I'm like, oh, I should just move a few inches to the right. I did, and then like everything
Yes.
shifted at that point.
Yes. I mean, not all the intuitive guidance. I know that people, excuse me, people think that some people think that it's a really clear message, which some of them are.
Yeah.
But like everything else, we may misinterpret that message.
Yes. And I felt so foolish, but it was refreshing in a way that something as simple as physically moving my body could actually be helpful when you're in that place of losing someone you love or overwhelmed. You sometimes need the simplest thing to kind of ground you back down into your essential humanity,
Yes.
and give you
Yeah.
perspective, and it's like getting a hug from spirit.
It is. And sometimes, people will talk about others saying the stupidest well, I've heard a little stronger language than stupidest things to them at funerals.
Oh, yeah.
And it's because of the sense of helplessness. You want to say something to help someone, but if you really stay in tune to spirit or the divine or the universal, however you define it, language, you know that sometimes the only thing you can say is, I wish I could say something, but I know there isn't anything I can say.
Yeah.
And give them that hug.
Yeah,
and just allowing that energy to be there, and that understanding that there's nothing that you're going to say to someone that's going to make it go away. And frankly, who would want that's the other, I think, misunderstood part, is that you get over grief,
mm,
but who would want to get over losing a loved one? It's about reforming the connection that you have with them, moving forward and remembering all of the memories that are always going to be there and keeping them alive. And in that way, it's not about getting over the loss of someone.
yeah, exactly. And to live, give yourself room to be angry
Yes.
and to remember the bad times and the things that you wish had been different. There's a lot of resentment and anger because your heart's been ripped
Yes.
out in many ways, or it feels like it. There's a
Yeah.
physicality. We were just a few months ago at the energy psychology conference, and I sat in on one of the workshops. You might have been there actually, on the physicality of grief into the heart,
Yeah.
and how they're able to see temporary changes in the heart itself,
Yes.
when someone is going through tremendous shock or grief or loss,
Yeah.
and how it can look like a heart attack, but then the measures of a heart attack aren't there. But we talk about like our heart is breaking. And
Yes,
yeah.
it's that heaviness that I talked about when we're looking at everything is energy, and the frequency and the vibration of that energy, and our emotions have the different frequencies, vibrations to them. And grief, sadness, it's a very low, heavy frequency. Anger is even a higher frequency than
Hmm.
the grief and the sadness, which a lot of times people will be moved to do certain create organizations to fight, like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers.
Hmm.
The anger can propel people into creating something that they feel like helps them rise above the loss of a loved one in this
Yeah.
case,
Yeah.
or another type of loss as well. I mean, there's so many different layers of loss, and people don't think about loss of identity that happens when you lose a loved one. If
Mm.
you're a mother or father, you still feel like a mother or father if you've lost your son, daughter. If you lose your spouse, you don't magically feel like you're not a wife, mother,
Married.
married, partner,
Yep.
whatever. Yeah, you feel that. And so there's so many different levels of
Yep.
that.
Well, I so appreciate you sharing your personal stories and the journeys that you've been on, and my heart goes out for you. You're such a loving and generous person. You
Thank you.
are, just by nature. And
Thank you,
to
Lori.
hear some of what you've gone through, it's just incredible that you didn't close down completely and become embittered.
Well, one of the best advices, and this is going to sound a little silly, but I think people can relate to it, that's in the helping business, we'll call it that, profession, whatever you want to call it. I remember going to a counselor, and I was in grad school, and I was so stressed out. And I was just, like crying, going, how am I supposed to help everybody else if I can't even get my own life together? And she started cracking up laughing.
Hmm.
And I stopped, and I'm like, what the hell's so funny?
Yeah.
And she's like, do you think that I have all my life together? It's about continuing to do your own work. And it's those of us, again, that don't, that can learn from our experiences and can help others as a result. It's not like you hit a finish line and you don't have to do any more work.
Yeah.
And I think that was, I don't remember the therapist's name, but I remember the advice.
Thank you, nameless therapist, for your wisdom and your appropriate laughter.
Yes.
So much for therapeutic joining and alliance.
I know. That was like, whoa. First of all, I didn't think a therapist was supposed to laugh at you when you're crying, but it was one of those shock moments.
Yep.
And again, some people may have been offended by it, but it really got my attention.
Yeah.
and gave me permission that I didn't have to be perfect
Yep.
before I started helping other people.
Yep. Yep. Oh, great story. Oh, this is a perfect place to stop for now. Unless there's
Yeah.
something else that you'd like to leave us with, maybe something about healing from the heart or
The only thing that I would like to, I guess, suggest to others is to continue to look for a variety of different techniques to connect with that intuition. It's not always going to be through meditation. It's not always going to be through some people can hear, some people
yeah,
can see, some
yep,
people can sense. So one of the other things that I learned from a wonderful teacher when I was in guided imagery is not everybody can see images when they do guided imagery. So just because you can't see something doesn't mean you can't sense it.
yep,
So really be open to your gifts of intuition. It may be a sense and not a visual. It may be auditory. It can be a combination of things. And
yeah,
the more that you utilize it, the more you practice with it, other forms of intuition can come into play,
yeah,
and it can assist you with a variety of different challenges that you're going to face.
yeah. Thank you. It's so
Even
true. And
internet
sometimes,
issues.
pardon?
Even internet issues.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we were listening to our guidance throughout this interview
Yes.
process. And sometimes it's just knowing something and you don't reflect on it and you aren't even aware that it's intuition because it just
Yeah.
comes so naturally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful time and space and stories with us, Sherry.
You are welcome. My pleasure.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you want to learn more, you can visit my website for podcast and resources at hopshealingtips.com. You can also like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and is not providing healthcare advice. Please seek guidance from your professional healthcare team should you need assistance.